Grace Dominion Assembly was no ordinary church. It was renowned across the city for its wealthy members and elaborate services. Its pews were filled with successful businessmen, stylish professionals, and the children of privilege. Sunday services often felt like fashion parades, with young men and women competing to outshine each other. It wasn't just a church, it was a hub of social activity where connections were formed, then status was affirmed. The young women in the church had one goal in mind: to marry for wealth. They evaluated the young men by their cars, their suits, and their ability to impress. Among this affluent congregation was a young man named Sam. Sam stood out, but not in the way others did. His modest appearance and simple lifestyle made him the subject of whispers and ridicule. Sam was a devoted Christian. He attended every service, always arriving on his small, worn-out bike. His wardrobe consisted of just a handful of neatly ironed shirts and trousers, which he alternated between Sundays. Despite being mock, Sam remained calm, focusing on his relationship with God. To the single ladies, however, he was invisible, or worse, a joke. The young women in Grace Dominion Assembly were relentless in their criticism of Sam. They called him the struggling one and used him as an example of what they didn't want in a husband. On 4 occasions, Sam had dared to approach some of them, only to be humiliated. One Sunday, Sam approached Anita, a choir member, and complimented her singing. "Thank you," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But I think you should focus on finding someone on your level." Another time, he offered to carry Cynthia's Bible after service. She laughed and said, "Don't bother. I can't afford to be seen with you." On another occasion, he tried to join a group discussion with some young ladies, only for them to abruptly leave, giggling behind his back. And during a church picnic, Sam offered to share his umbrella with Diana when it started to rain. She declined, loudly stating, "I'd rather get wet than walk with you." Sam bore all these insults with grace, never responding in anger. His humility was unshakable, and his faith kept him grounded. While most young women in Grace Dominion Assembly were blinded by materialism, one person saw things differently. Her name was Peace, and her name reflected her character. Peace was a humble and kind-hearted young woman who treated everyone with respect, regardless of their social status. She wasn't swayed by the wealth and glamour that surrounded her in the church. Peace often noticed how the other ladies ridiculed Sam. Unlike them, she admired his devotion to God and his calm demeanor. One Sunday after service, Peace observed Sam helping an elderly woman carry her bags to her car. She smiled to herself. "There's more to him than meets the eye," she thought. Peace's qualities made her stand out in the church. She was always the first to volunteer for church activities, whether it was cleaning the sanctuary or organizing charity events. On one occasion, she personally cooked and served food at an outreach program, earning the admiration of the less privileged and her pastor alike. Her humility and willingness to serve made her a rare gem in a congregation obsessed with appearances. Sam had long noticed Peace's kind nature, but he never mustered the courage to speak to her. That changed one rainy Sunday. As members rushed to their cars, Peace stood under the church's awning, stranded without an umbrella. Sam, seeing an opportunity, approached her with a polite smile. "Peace, can I offer you a ride home?" he asked, pointing to his modest bike. "Sure, Sam." "Thank you," she replied without hesitation, much to the shock of onlookers. The ride home was filled with laughter and deep conversation. They talked about their faith, their dreams, and their views on life. It felt as if they had known each other forever. When they arrived at Peace's home, she turned to him and said, "Thank you, Sam. I enjoyed this." From that day, their friendship blossomed. They exchanged numbers and began talking regularly. Peace didn't see a struggling young man, she saw a kind soul with a heart of gold. As Sam and Peace's friendship deepened, the whispers behind their backs grew louder. The other ladies in the church could not understand why Peace, a beautiful and kind-hearted woman, would spend so much time with Sam, the so-called poor guy. One Sunday, after a service, Peace was approached by her best friend, Jen. "Are you sure about this, Peace?" Jen asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "You're hanging out with him a lot. People are starting to talk." Peace smiled, unbothered by the gossip. "Sam is a good person, Jen. You'll see for yourself." But Jen wasn't convinced. She had been among the loudest to mock Sam, and the idea of Peace being close to him made her uncomfortable. She couldn't understand why someone as stunning and successful as Peace would settle for someone who seemed to have nothing to offer. The mockery escalated in the church, with other women calling Peace a charity case and whispering about how desperate she was. Peace didn't mind. She remained strong, knowing her worth wasn't defined by the opinions of others. 6 months into their friendship, Sam and Peace grew even closer. They spent countless hours talking, laughing, and supporting each other. Sam's modest lifestyle never bothered Peace, and she admired how deeply he cared for others. It was clear to her that Sam was a man of character, something that the superficiality of the church had failed to see. As New Year's Day approached, Sam had been planning something special. He knew it was time to take the next step with Peace, but he wanted to make it unforgettable. The church had organized a beach outing for the congregation, and Sam decided that it would be the perfect setting for his proposal. On the evening of the outing, as the sun began to set, Sam took Peace's hand and led her down to the shoreline. With a heart full of love, Sam got down on one knee and pulled out a small, simple ring. "Peace, will you marry me?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Tears welled up in Peace's eyes. She had never felt more certain of anything in her life. "Yes, Sam. Yes," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him. Though the other church members laughed and whispered, making fun of the simplicity of the proposal, Sam and Peace were unconcerned with their judgment. It was a moment that was truly theirs, and it was perfect. After Peace and Sam's engagement, the atmosphere in Grace Dominion Assembly became charged with whispers and gossip. Most of the congregation's young ladies couldn't believe that Peace had agreed to marry Sam, the man they had all once dismissed as beneath them. Jen, Peace's best friend, was particularly upset. She couldn't understand why Peace, with all her beauty and potential, would settle for someone like Sam. Despite her attempts to hide her feelings, her jealousy was obvious. Jen would often make mocking remarks about Sam, even though Peace didn't allow her to speak badly of him. One day, as the couple sat in a corner of the church cafe discussing wedding plans, Jen walked over with a forced smile. "You know, Peace," she began, "I just don't get it. You could have any guy you want, someone with real money, someone who can give you a glamorous life. Why Sam?" Peace, who had had this question many times before, simply smiled. "Jen, money isn't everything. Sam's the kind of man who will support me spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. That's what matters." Jen didn't respond, but her face twisted in frustration. Deep down, she was envious of the bond Peace and Sam shared, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Peace was making a huge mistake. The day of Sam and Peace's wedding arrived, and it was as quiet and humble as they had hoped. Unlike the extravagant weddings most members of the church had, Sam and Peace wanted something simple, surrounded by close friends and family. The ceremony took place in a small church hall, decorated with modest flowers and soft lighting. The guests, mostly family and a few church members, arrived in their best attire, but nothing extravagant. Jen reluctantly accepted the role of maid of honor, though she was visibly displeased. As she stood at the altar, her eyes constantly shifted toward Sam with an unsettling look, as though she couldn't accept the reality of the union. When the couple exchanged vows, many of the young women in the congregation looked on in mockery, their laughs barely stifled. They couldn't understand how Peace, with her beauty and elegance, could marry someone so unfashionable as Sam. The wedding reception was small, but the love and joy in the air were felt by many. Peace's heart was full when Sam was beaming, his eyes locked onto his brides. It was a perfect moment for them, free from the judgment of others. Just as the reception began to wind down, an unexpected surprise arrived. An exotic jeep pulled up in front of the church hall. It was sleek, luxurious, and anything but the modest vehicles everyone had seen Sam arrive in before. The crowd stared in confusion as the driver opened the door for the newlyweds. Sam helped Peace into the car, and they waved goodbye to the congregation, leaving them in stunned silence. Jen's face turned pale with disbelief. She had no idea that Sam, that poor guy, had the kind of wealth to afford such a luxury. The young women who had once laughed at him now stared at the couple in shock, realizing how wrong they had been. Sam and Peace's honeymoon was nothing short of extraordinary. The couple flew to Dubai, where they stayed in a luxurious resort overlooking the beach. Peace was overwhelmed by the beauty and opulence of their surroundings, but she was most grateful for the time she got to spend with Sam. They explored the city, visited iconic landmarks, and enjoyed private dinners. Peace couldn't help but wonder why Sam had chosen to keep his wealth a secret. One evening, as they sat on a private balcony overlooking the city's skyline, Peace turned to Sam. "Sam, this is also amazing. But I have to ask, why didn't you tell me you had all this?" Sam smiled softly. "I didn't want you to love me for anything other than who I am. My wealth wasn't what drew you to me, Peace. It was my heart, my faith, and the love I had for you." Peace felt a rush of gratitude. She had always believed Sam was more than meets the eye, and now she understood just how much he had sacrificed to protect her from the superficial world around them. After a blissful honeymoon in Dubai, Sam and Peace returned to what seemed like an entirely different world. The simple house that Sam had once called home was no longer just a small apartment, it was a mansion nestled in a peaceful estate on the outskirts of the city. As they drove up the long, winding driveway, Peace's eyes widened in disbelief. The house was grand, with a beautifully landscaped garden and a majestic gate that opened to reveal their new life together. "I can't believe this is where you live," Peace whispered, her voice filled with awe. Sam smiled warmly. "I wanted to keep it a surprise for you, Peace. I never wanted to show off, but now that we are married, I want you to enjoy everything with me." The couple spent the next few days settling into their new home, and Peace couldn't help but feel like she was in a dream. Everything had changed so suddenly, and the life she once knew seemed distant. But one thing remained unchanged, her love for Sam. The following Sunday, Sam and Peace decided to attend church to give thanks for their marriage and their blessings. They arrived in a car that made heads turn, the sleek, black SUV that contrasted greatly with the modest bikes and small cars many of the church members drove. As they entered Grace Dominion Assembly, the stairs were impossible to ignore. Everyone seemed stunned by the transformation. Peace, who had once been a simple member of the congregation, was now married to Sam, the man they had all laughed at. But what really caught everyone's attention was the way Sam and Peace were dressed. Sam wore a perfectly tailored suit, exuding confidence and elegance, while Peace was radiant in a beautiful dress that highlighted her beauty and grace. The couple walked to the front of the church, hand in hand, and sat together, their hearts full of joy. The church members, especially the young ladies, could hardly believe their eyes. The women who had once mocked Sam now found themselves filled with regret. They had judged him by his appearance, never knowing the wealth and character hidden behind it. Jen, who had once been Peace's best friend, felt an overwhelming sense of jealousy as she watched the couple. Her bitterness had only grown since the wedding. She had been so sure that Sam was nothing more than a struggling young man, but now she saw the truth. The realization hit her hard. She had let her superficial desires cloud her judgment. Sam, now clearly wealthy, became the talk of the church. Jen, feeling humiliated by how wrong she had been, tried everything to get close to him. She began calling Sam more often, trying to strike up conversations whenever they crossed paths. "Hey, Sam," Jen said one Sunday, a fake sweetness in her voice. "How's it going? I've been thinking about you and Peace. You two look so happy together." Sam nodded politely but remained distant. He wasn't interested in rekindling any connection with Jen, especially after all the mockery she had subjected him and Peace to. He was loyal to his wife and had no time for the shallow attempts at friendship. Jen, frustrated and desperate, began calling Sam at odd hours, hoping to catch his attention. But each time, Sam recorded their conversations and played them for Peace, showing her the kind of friend Jen truly was. One night, Jen called Sam late, her voice trembling as she claimed to be stranded on the road. "Sam, I'm stuck. My car broke down, and I don't know what to do. Can you please come help me?" Sam, now wary of Jen's intentions, turned to Peace. "I think she's up to something," he said, his voice calm. "We should go help her, but I don't want to be alone with her." Peace agreed, and they devised a plan. Sam drove to the location Jen had mentioned, and Peace hid in the back seat, lying down so Jen wouldn't notice her presence. When they arrived, Jen rushed to the car and jumped into the front seat, clearly hoping to be alone with Sam. As soon as she sat down, she began to flirt with him, attempting to make him feel guilty for marrying Peace. "You know, Sam," Jen said, "Peace doesn't really understand you. She's too good for you. I've always thought we'd make a great couple. You should have picked me." At that moment, Peace sat up from the back seat and spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Jen, I've heard every single one of your calls to Sam. I knew you were trying to get his attention, but I didn't believe it until now." Jen's face turned bright red with shame. "Peace, I didn't mean," she stammered. "No, Jen," Peace interrupted. "You've shown your true colors. I'm done with you." From that moment, Peace cut ties with Jen completely. She no longer needed a friend who had no respect for her marriage and no understanding of loyalty. With Jen out of the picture, Peace and Sam's life continued to flourish. They focused on building their marriage and growing in their faith. Sam, despite his wealth, remained the same humble man Peace had fallen in love with. He spent most of his time working in his business and volunteering at the church, ensuring that his success didn't change his character. As for Peace, she found joy in supporting Sam and pursuing her own goals. She became more involved in the church's charity work and outreach programs, helping those in need just as Sam had always done. Their bond grew stronger, and the couple became an inspiration to many in the church. But while Sam and Peace were building a life of love and service, the other members of Grace Dominion Assembly couldn't shake their regrets. They had underestimated Sam, and now they could only watch as he and Peace thrived. As the months passed, Sam and Peace's story spread beyond the church. Their wealth and humble demeanor caught the attention of influential people in the city. Invitations to high-profile events began pouring in. They were invited to charity galas, conferences, and even exclusive dinners. Everywhere they went, they were treated with respect and admiration. The couple, however, never let the attention go to their heads. They attended these events not for the glamour, but to continue doing what they loved, helping others. Their status had opened doors, but they remained true to the values they had always upheld. One evening, at a charity dinner, Sam and Peace were seated next to a well-known philanthropist who had heard about their story. "You two are an inspiration," he said, raising his glass to them. "Your faith and humility in the face of wealth are rare. Keep doing what you're doing." Sam and Peace exchanged a glance, humbled by the compliment. Their journey had been long, and while they had faced many challenges, they knew their purpose was greater than any wealth or recognition they had gained. Months passed, and just as life seemed perfect, Jen reappeared. She had gone through a difficult time after her confrontation with Peace. The other women in the church had distanced themselves from her, and she realized too late that her jealousy had caused her to lose not only a friend but also the respect of many. Jen approached Peace one Sunday after service, her face filled with regret. "Peace, I've made so many mistakes," she began, her voice shaky. "I was wrong about you, and I was wrong about Sam. Please, can you forgive me?" Peace took a deep breath, her heart softened by Jen's admission. "Jen, I can forgive you, but trust is something that takes time to rebuild." Jen nodded, her eyes filled with remorse. "I understand. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I've learned a lot from my mistakes." While Peace agreed to forgive Jen, she made it clear that their friendship would never be the same. She had learned the hard way that some people were only in your life for the wrong reasons, and while forgiveness was important, it didn't mean she had to let Jen back into her inner circle. As the years went by, Sam and Peace's relationship continued to grow. They faced the challenges that all couples do: family struggles, financial pressures, and the balancing act of work and home life. But through it all, they never lost sight of the foundation they had built their marriage on: faith, humility, and love. One day, Sam sat down with Peace after a particularly busy week. "Peace, I've been thinking. We've come so far, and I just want to make sure we are still on the same path. How are you feeling about everything?" Peace smiled and took his hand. "Sam, I'm happy. I've never been more content. We've built a life together, one that's based on who we really are, not what others think we should be. I love you." Sam smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I love you too. And I thank God every day for bringing us together." As the years passed, Sam and Peace became pillars in their community. Their story of love, humility, and perseverance continued to inspire others, and they became examples of what true wealth meant. They used their success to support various charitable projects, always remembering the struggles they had faced in their earlier years. Grace Dominion Assembly, once a place of competition and materialism, began to change as more members followed Sam and Peace's example. The church leadership noticed the shift in attitude and encouraged others to focus on building relationships with God rather than on material wealth. In the end, Sam and Peace's love story became a legacy, one that proved that true worth was not in what you owned or how you looked, but in the love and kindness you gave to others.